Welcome to the first session in the Empower Idaho Peer Support Conference. We are going to wait a minute to allow folks to come in. In the meantime, just want to make sure that everybody is on mute. So just want to reduce that echo. If you can mute yourself, that would be awesome. Thank you. Good morning, Mary Teresa. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and get going. So again, welcome to the Empower Idaho Peer Support Conference. Our first session today is Ethics and Boundaries in Peer Support with Dyany Munson, a huge expert in all things ethics and I mean truly all things peer support. So thank you for being here, Dyany. Before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping items. So here we have the Empower Idaho email available. So we will be monitoring the chat here in Zoom, but if you have any questions throughout, it's just an additional way to connect with us. So feel free to jot down that email. My name is Alejandra Del Toro, and I am the program manager with Empower Idaho. Mary, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, another one of our Empower Idaho team members.
Hi, I'm Mary Wright, and I am the Marketing and Communications Coordinator for Empower Idaho. Welcome.
Thank you, Mary. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Empower Idaho, we are a organization that operates under Janus, and our program offers provider training, education, advocacy for adults with behavioral health conditions. Empower Idaho is very excited to host the first of 3 peer conferences this year. Again, so thank you for joining. A couple of tech items for those of you that are just now joining us. Please ensure that your microphone is on mute. You're welcome to keep your webcam on or off. That's totally your call. And this will be an interactive session. So the way that we will be interacting is through the chat box. So again, that will be monitored. Please utilize that chat box. We do have the slides that were available in the lobby. So if you were unable to download them at that time, Mary is going to put a downloadable link in the chat. And then I just want to remind everybody that we had sent an email earlier this week with an important piece of the Code of Ethics that Dyany shared with us. So please feel free to have that pulled up so you have that available when it's referenced. And then as you can see, as you were notified, the session is being recorded and it will be available for viewing. Some reminders for CEUs. There is eligibility items that you must adhere to in order to be eligible, and that includes attending the full session, completing the evaluation, and within the evaluation, there's 3 content-specific questions that must be answered correctly. At least 2 out of the 3 must be answered correctly. So that will be assessed in the following week, and you can anticipate a certificate within the next 14 business days. Again, so if there are any questions, go ahead and utilize that chat box or email Empower Idaho. But otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Dyany, for being here with us.
Good morning, everyone. Just to introduce myself a little bit more. I've been in peer support for a little over 6 years now, and I've been training peer support certification for 3 or 4 years. I kind of lost count. And so there's a lot of things that nothing will help you learn stuff more than teaching things. So yeah, and I do recognize a few names that I've seen, and so it's good to see everybody. We're going to just deep dive in. I do recommend that you do have your peer support code of ethics up. I'm not going to have a slide with that on it, but we're going to have questions that are going to need you to have that up and kind of be aware of. So, and if you guys have questions during any part of the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. We have, we're going over ethics and boundaries in peer support. And our objectives today include, we're going to define some common terminology so we all have like are on equal ground that way. And we're going to review a bit of the peer support code of ethics and professional conduct. I know that a lot of you, most of you are probably peer support workers, but there may also be recovery coaches, peer recovery coaches, family support, and other things. Youth support. Most of us go under the peer support code of ethics, but I do know family support has a separate code. And I try to be a little more universal with the scenarios that come up. We're going to learn why healthy boundaries are the core of ethical and professional conduct. I know all of us getting trained in the state of Idaho, especially if you come through my class, are really, really familiar with boundaries. But we're going to do some deep diving into how and why it's so vital to keeping up with our ethical and professional conduct. And we're going to learn some tips and tricks to help all of us better understand and implement boundaries with the peers in the workplace. So the purpose of boundaries in peer services is threefold. The thing that people automatically think of when it comes to boundaries is usually self-care. You know, I can say no so that I don't get hurt by somebody else's choices, or I don't overtax myself. As in this area, it gives a better work-life balance, protects us from responsibilities that are not ours. A core thing of boundaries is understanding where our responsibilities stop and somebody else's or nobody's begin. Protects us from burnout, and maintains and builds on our own recovery. Because as we know, recovery is never a done deal. Recovery is something ongoing. We want to constantly be building on that. And building our boundary skills can really help with that. But boundaries also serve to help us support our peers in growing in their own recovery. It's more strength-based. Rather than identifying, rather than seeing the problems that the peer is having and feeling the need to fix them, if we can set proper boundaries, we're seeing the person and what they are capable of doing. If we see the problem, see a need to fix things, try to fix things, that is not strength-based, that is not recovery-oriented. It also allows the building of skills, confidence, and responsibility, which are all vital components to recovery. When it comes to, part of the thing is all of our peers have goals. That's part of recovery plans. And a lot of times they either have had people swooping in so much or they've been so demoralized, they don't feel that they can do things. But there's a lot of different things. If we set good boundaries here, that we can allow them to build up the skills and the confidence. Oh, this thing I already could kind of do, it helps, what? And it's very, very valuable that way. And when we swoop in and try to fix things, they never get that. It steals their power away from them. It encourages finding of appropriate resources. There will be barriers in our peers' lives that they are not able to fully overcome on their own. But that's okay. They can find appropriate resources just for the thing that they need, rather than feeling that they are completely helpless. It empowers the individuals to make positive changes in their life because they start to realize they can do some things that make a positive difference. And with that hope and confidence, they can move forward. In ethics, good boundaries better support confidentiality. They keep us in our lane. And they support the peer supporters. That's our recovery, which also goes to self-care, but that's part of our code of ethics, and reduces legal liability and increases ethical compliance. So just in case you ever doubt that the ethics are there for a good reason, and it's not just to protect the agency or to protect the state. So I personally have divided. One of the things I learned is because I started out with not good boundaries. I was not raised with very good boundaries. And so boundaries were a very new thing to me in many ways when it came to peer support. And one of the things I developed that helped me is dividing into types of boundaries. Internal boundaries are boundaries that you set for and keep for yourself regarding your own feelings and actions. And they could look like, I am not going to beat myself up when I try something and I don't do great at it the first time. That's an internal boundary. That is a limit to what we expect and are working on, that is very valuable to helping us to stay motivated and helping us to move forward. And that I would call that an internal emotional boundary, because that involves the feelings that we have. I'm not going to feel bad when I have to when I don't do as well as I wanted to do. Internal and emotional boundaries are, limits to the feelings. Physical boundaries are limits to our actions. I know that I have to do this presentation in the morning, and I also recognize that I'm very tempted to finish watching this Netflix series and stay up until 1 a.m. doing so. However, I have also recognized that I don't do as well the next day when I do that. So I'm going to set that physical boundary for myself of I have to turn off the TV at 10 o'clock. Things like this that help with your self-care, those boundaries. External boundaries are those you set for and enforce regarding the actions of others and our feelings about others. Now, we don't do these to control others. This is more of a limit between our taking responsibility for others, or letting or feel, and including responsibility for things that they may try to put on us. An external emotional boundary will be maybe I'm not going to feel responsible for another person making bad decisions and experiencing consequences of that. And that includes my peers. I am not going to feel responsible for that. And that can be sometimes a hard boundary, but it can help a lot when it comes to saying no to things that we should say no to. And forgive me for using the word should. I know it's a naughty word, but that's not it. When we can say no to things, it helps. Okay. And external physical boundaries, those are what a lot of times people, that's actually, no, I'm not going to, if you're going to ask for money, I'm going to say no. I'm going to physically say no, and I'm not going to give you money. Or with a peer, they call at 9 o'clock saying, I'm stranded out here and I need a ride really badly. That external physical boundary, says, I cannot ethically give you a ride. We may say, what other resources do you have or can you think of? But we set that boundary as to actually offering or giving them a ride. And we're going to, we want you to remember these. If you can hit the print screen button on your keyboard, or do a screenshot if you're on a phone, but these can be very helpful, and we will use them going forward in this presentation. So we're going to break down the code of ethics in terms of boundaries. We're going to be focusing on the peer support code of ethics and professional conduct for the majority of this presentation, but that applies to enough of us, and there's enough overlap with the family support, that hopefully you're going to be able to take what you've learned today and apply it to the few differences in other code of ethics. We're not going to cover every single item in our code of ethics, but we will cover most of them. I'm going to present a scenario, and I say for each item, I'm going to present a scenario one at a time, but there will be multiple code of ethics boundary or violations in each scenario. And then we're going to discuss how boundaries can best be used or misused in the situation, how that ties to ethical compliance, and what types of boundaries, you know, like internal, external, physical, or emotional, would help the most. And it can, and the answer may be multifold with everything. So we're sent a link to the current code of ethics, and we have it in the chat if you didn't see it before. It'd be handy to have that up. I don't know if you can do a split screen and be able to go back and forth to help you review and answer questions during the presentation. Everybody ready? Ready? We're gonna go. Okay. So scenario one, we have a peer supporter. His name is Tim. He has a really good rapport with a peer named John, and John doesn't have a lot of natural supports. So Tim sometimes gives John rides outside of their session times. He knows he needs them, you know, he really needs to build that rapport and keep that rapport. And they have long conversations, and sometimes the conversations are about a lot of Tim's struggles, not John's struggles, and the extra and their current struggles that he's dealing with. The extra time and the miles that Tim puts towards assisting John are difficult to fit in both his schedule and his budget. But he does it because he feels he really needs to. John really needs him. So questions. Which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? I'll give you guys a minute to look at this one. Look at the code of ethics, think of things, put it in the chat. That I see physical. Physical is not specific code of ethics. E. Can anybody tell me what E is? This isn't type of boundaries. These are code of ethics that are being violated. So E is conducting themselves in a manner that fosters their own recovery. That was not entering into a dual relationship, seek to role model recovery. Absolutely. We role model recovery. One of the things with that is sometimes being very strategic in our sharing so that we can, we role model recovery. We're not processing things with our peers that are not part of our recovery yet. So excellent. And yeah, I see Michelle, she's my co-facilitator on my thing, and she like knows all the answers. So if you're on a phone and you don't have access to a computer, you can you can flip back and forth to the code of ethics, but yes, we can go over a few of these. It's there now. Can anybody tell me if there's a specific code of ethics that has to do with boundaries? That is correct, Stephanie. There is no specific code of ethics item that has to do with boundaries. So we are getting into some more questions that'll have to do with boundaries in a second. But right now, I will tell you, you guys hit a lot of these. Role modeling recovery is something that is not happening in this situation, partially because of poor boundaries, but also because of not role modeling in what they were sharing. There's Code of Ethics item B says respecting the rights and dignities of those that they serve. Are they doing that when they swoop in and solve problems? Rather, I see a lot of no. Yeah, what kind of things? Let's get to the next. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? Yes, Derek, yes, absolutely. Dual roles. This is absolutely dual relationships. Dependency on the peer supporter, yeah. And it could be causing issues with the equalization of power. You don't have a car, I have a car, therefore that is my role of power. Dependency, absolutely. That is absolutely damage that can happen. Yeah, excellent. The power differential, this messes with the power differential. Your peer is not learning to take responsibility and figuring things out. Yes, absolutely. Is some of their power and responsibility being taken from them because Tim is swooping? Swooping is my word for violating boundaries and kind of being some enabling. Yeah. And they'll become more worried about you. Yeah. I mean, peer support is mutual and reciprocal, but we do need to remember that. But at the same time, we do not process things with our peers. Not modeling how to find resources and solve problems. Absolutely. And now, in this case, it's not, well, he's not modeling that because he's Tim's not solving problems effectively. And yeah, remain aware of your skills and limitations. Absolutely, Amy, great catch. That is absolutely. We want to remain aware of our skills and limitations. Now, should we be exploring options or should the peer be exploring options? And staying in your lane, yes. Yeah, is it our job? Yes, the peer should be solving problems. Is our job to teach our peers things? Absolutely. You guys are so good at this. It is not our job. We model. We can ask open-ended questions. Sometimes we can be a resource broker. We do not teach problem solving. We work problem solving with them. Yes, we lose our professionalism. Absolutely. Yeah, the peer should be. Now, can Tim ask questions that might help the peer go in the right direction? Not guiding or leading, but help him. Oh, yeah, I do have some power here. Yeah. We want to ask open-ended questions and some things like, what other resources do you have? How do you get around other times? Do no harm. Exactly. We want to do no harm. And by taking away his power, is it getting in the way of his recovery? Yeah. Because recovery is about finding that power and having that hope that they can move forward in their recovery. So then we get into the types that we mentioned before with the grid, internal or external boundaries. So internal, would it help to have some internal boundaries here about feelings and yeah. Oh yes, you guys are awesome. External boundaries, would it help to have some external boundaries here? Yes. I see the yes just off the screen. Yes. So then what specific boundaries would be appropriate to set and enforce? And you can say how, and when we enforce boundaries, they need to be logical consequences. And consequences has a bad rap. Consequences can be good as well. So, but time boundaries. When you say time boundaries, I assume you mean something like these are my business hours, and maybe not even answering it afterwards. Privacy. What do you mean by privacy, Leah? Rides are not part of the job. Your availability, absolutely. Keeping personal things personal, right, with the sharing of his story. And it's not just the personal things, because we're there. Part of our code of ethics is we share our stories, but we share our recovery stories, not our I'm still in the thick of the crap stories, right? Telling peer you will no longer be able to give them rides. They encourage them to find other resources. Yes. And sometimes we can say, I can talk about this more during our session. And sometimes if we are like dancing the edge, we can do a little problem solving with them on the phone. What other resources do you have? And maintaining my own recovery. Yeah. And, you know, we can sometimes inform them of resources as a resource broker. And I will just tell you right now, some of the more effective ways to be a resource broker, you ask very broadly first, what can you do? And then where can you look? Like NTS, the National Transportation, and I can never remember the whole thing. There's resources for rides, right? Some natural supports and some not natural supports, professional supports. And then if they are absolutely just stumped, I still try not to give them stuff. I'm like, this is a place I know you can look for that I've used before to find resources for transportation. You know, how can I support you in looking through that yourself? Hand up, not the handout approach. Absolutely. This is exploring options, but we're not guiding them, if that makes sense. We want them to have as much power as possible. And resource brokering is a kind of, it's a delicate thing, because it doesn't just mean here's a solution, here's a solution, here's a solution. It is exploring what they understand, helping them to explore that stuff, giving them resources to find their own things, because otherwise they're just like, tell me what I need to do, and you know, then I have something, and they're not gaining that valuable problem solving stuff, right? So you guys did great with that one. Let's go to the next scenario. So peer support Sally as a peer named Jane with a physical disability that limits her mobility. Sally doesn't have a lot of physical strength, but she pushes herself to help Jane get in and out of Sally's car, as well as get Jane's wheelchair loaded into the trunk. Jane seems really thankful, so Sally knows she can't let Jane down by showing any reluctance or weakness. Sally knows Jane relies on Sally's help and feels successful when she is able to get Jane where she wants to go. Yeah, so, and I want to just mention, so Terry's right, they make the decision, but sometimes the way we present things limits the decision making. It's just it's a nuance as to how we present and what we present. So so which peer code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? Susan, yeah, Susan, you're sending me stuff direct, and that's okay. Yeah, making the peer feel helpless. Absolutely. Because is Sally seeing Jane's limitations or her strengths? Limitations. Yep, Amy. Limits, limits, limits. She needs me. She can't do this. She needs me. Yeah, power equalization. That is definitely one that's being violated. Respecting the rights and dignity. Definitely another one being violated. What else is being violated here? Yeah, power differential. Could it be a possibility that Sally is discriminating on based on physical disabilities? Possibly. Limits, self, yeah. You guys are kicking butt here. Manner that fosters their own recovery. Yeah, if this is really pushing Sally hard, yep. She needs transportation so they can help with getting people places. You can feel bad, but still help others to. Yes, that is our role. Correct? Oh, for sure. Remaining aware of your skills and limitations. Absolutely. You guys are just really rocking this. So we got a lot of code of ethics violations. Do you think Sally feels like she is hurting her peer? Yeah, exactly. No, but she is. She doesn't feel like she feels, because a lot of us, we come into this role of peer support. Yeah, she's unintentionally doing, she thinks she's helping. This is what a lot of us have been trained, is helping, is swooping in and helping where we see a limitation. And it's one of the areas that can be very hard, because this peer may not want, they may have been treated this their whole life, and they may not even realize that they have power or the capacity to do things for themselves. But is it our role to swoop in and do stuff for? Or is our role to help them find their power? Find power. Power is an important part of recovery, right? And sometimes I know all of us have been in that recovery process, and there were times when we felt so powerless and helpless, right? And that's a horrible feeling. And if people say, you're right, you are helpless, I have to do things for you, how does that feel? You guys need to feel empowered. They can build. Yeah, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. Even if it's what we're used to, we kind of sit there without purpose or hope. Because if we can't do anything, what's the point? But if we are with somebody that's like, I know you can do stuff, I will support you while you do it. How does that feel? While you find solutions and build those skills and resources, how does that feel? Empowering, energizing. Does it feel hopeful? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it maintains their dignity. It's motivating. It's incredible. Never underestimate the power that you can give being there consistently, calmly, and believing in someone patiently. Yes, I can take on the world. I feel if I can do something, I can move forward. If I can't do anything, I'm relying on everybody forever. And I am one of the 4 foundations of recovery is a sense of purpose. And it's very, and that comes from understanding we can do something. That's what purpose is. Bill shared, I had this scenario, and the nurse and our nurse practitioner told me not to enable her. They said she was trying to take advantage of the situation. Sometimes they do that. And sometimes I feel like outsiders will say she's trying to take advantage, and that may be happening, but sometimes that person feels so helpless because they've been treated that way so long that they are terrified to move out of that. And we have to understand in a recovery-oriented method, that in a recovery-oriented thing, that we support them in finding these things. And that includes saying no, but it also includes having hope and not like if we're like, oh, you're just manipulating me, then are we going to approach that very kindly and with patience? Or is it easy to do that? So there's some emotional internal boundaries as well. I'm not going to, and I'm just going to pull up the rest of the questions here, where I'm not going to feel used, because I can set boundaries. And when I do that, I can have better rapport with you, because I'm not looking for ways that you're trying to use me, and I'm going to feel bad because I need to say no. Does that make sense? Does you see how those internal boundaries came in? And Jane can actually be hurting herself by not wanting to show the peer weakness. Absolutely. Because we openly share our recovery stories. And that includes sometimes saying, I can't do that. And I recognize that with myself and that I've hurt myself. There and Amy sent a question. Do you feel like there are situations where we need to meet them where they are? Absolutely. And encourage them to improve. It depends on how we do that. We can do that, and a lot of times this is patience. One of the stickiest things when it comes to ethics and boundaries is sometimes the peer says, I want to do this. I want to reduce isolation and go out in the community. And oh, absolutely, Lisa. That's a great way to share lived experience. I have physical limitations. Discuss how I have found ways to manage some of those limitations to get them up. Absolutely. But sorry, I guess so. I'm pointing. That means bouncing off the walls. When we say encourage them to improve, we don't mean guide, and we don't mean because that's really hard sometimes. Sometimes like, I want to go out and go to the zoo today. And we get there and they have not prepared. They're not ready. They don't have time to do so. And we can swoop in to help them meet their goal. But then we are becoming, their goal is now our goal. And when their goal is our goal, are we going to be working towards getting that goal done, or are we going to be actually supporting them and building up their skills? We're working on the goal. And is it our role to work on the goal, or is it our role to support the peer in finding the skills and the resources? Support the peer. That is honestly one of the trickiest parts. Is it's like, wait a minute, I know that they want to do this. And we feel so accomplished when they get that done, right? We do. But then it's about us. It's not about them. Oh, look what they did with a lot of my help. But it's about finding their power. That's where we need to do stuff. Chris says, I usually will not drive people places if they are a fall risk. So would have her seek out transportation, then meet them where they want to go. That is an excellent boundary. I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but that is a very reasonable boundary to set. And sometimes your agency will have rules like that. And go with them on the bus. How can I support you in finding and feeling comfortable with these skills? Yeah, sometimes supporting the peer may not feel that way to the peer. Excellent. Cecil, I'm not sorry. And absolutely, sometimes, especially if that's what they're used to, that's the way everybody's treated them all their lives. You're not supporting me. You're not supporting me. You're not doing this and saving me. And that's where the internal emotional boundaries come in. I am not responsible for how they were treated by other people. I am not responsible for them thinking that I'm not supporting them when I'm absolutely able and willing to support them in these other ways. Ask open-ended questions about what that looks for them and what are things that they have done in the past to take steps towards their goals and what path they want to take towards meeting their goals. Excellent. help them understand the consequences of not planning. The way that I would do to help them understand is I would just be firm and calm about my boundaries. It's like, we only have until 2 hours, and it takes a half hour to get there and a half hour to get back. And that leaves 10 minutes to be at the zoo. And so I'm going to have to say, we can't go, we can't go to, and then they may be disappointed, but this is how they're understanding the consequences. And it's logical. It's not a punishment. And it's like, what can you do next time to better ensure that we have the time to do what you want to do? That open-ended question. So somebody said, how can you tell appointments I have limits? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Katina, but there's a lot of different ways that we can tell people that we have limits. And this can be hard, especially if we are not super strong in the boundary skills yet, which is totally possible. But we can say, we can sometimes fall back on the agency. Most agencies are cool with you saying, my agency doesn't allow that. One of the things I say sometimes, and yes, somebody says your first thing, you tell them what your role is. That is a huge one for me. A lot of the peers that I've worked with have had other services that are community-based, such as CBRS, case management, PCS, and they sometimes get confused as to what our role is. And so I will not only bring it up in the first visit with, I am here to support you emotionally while you work on things and build skills. I'm here to help you find your power and work myself out of a job. And sometimes reminders are needed, and that's okay. And sometimes things will come up, and I might say, and one of the things is a lot of times like, oh, if I say no, they're just going to be hurting and helpless. And that, if we start thinking that, we're not setting good emotional boundaries. Because when we continue to set those emotional boundaries, where is it my responsibility, or is it part of me that they don't have a ride right now? No, it is not. Yeah. And so when we can say, I can't do that for you, sometimes it will be like, I've noticed that you really seem to be doing pretty well at this. And so do you feel comfortable? What other things can you do to kind of build up your strength here? Or what other resources do you have? A lot of open-ended questions. And it can be, or I can't do that, but how would you like to move forward, and how can I support you with that, with what you would like to try next? And Lisa says it's important to define some boundaries when beginning to work with peer. Absolutely. And not just at the beginning, but oftentimes I find it not unusual to have to remind them quarterly. It depends on the peer, and it depends on the situations. And Lisa has a paper that defines each role, and that can be useful. I have found personally that most peers keep that kind of thing until I walk out into the session, and then it gets tossed. But it can be useful. It depends on the peer, and reminding them of what our role is, what other roles can do that, and I'll come up. I'm like, I can't do that, but that sounds like something case manager could do. Does that sound like something you might be interested in, service you might be interested in? Because we can refer as well. Referrals are well within our resource brokering and role. Okay, case manager, CBRS, PCS sometimes. There's just so many things, and one of the things I will have is what I call front-loaded questions, which are questions that are pretty generic, and so I can get in a situation and they come out automatically, and that gives me time to think of something more specific. And one of the things I say is, have you talked to your counselor about that? What can you do about that? Those are very, very, well, the counselor is a little more specific, but what can you do about that? The peer can't tell I'm panicking, trying to find better questions. They're thinking of things while I am trying to think of, okay, what boundaries do I need to set with this new situation? What other things do I need? Does that make sense? You guys are really good. There's a lot of specific boundaries that we've talked about over a lot of ways that we can enforce those boundaries. And I rarely just say no, simply because that can make it, can you help me with this? No. That can feel kind of not good, right? And so what I might say is, I can't do that for you, but I can do this. Or I can, and how can I support you through the proper ways? And sometimes there's pushback. I mean, one of the things that we get afraid of, one of the reasons sometimes we fudge on our boundaries is because we're afraid of that pushback. But if those emotional boundaries help us recognize, I am not responsible for that, but and that can help give us the strength to say, I can't do that for you. And one of the things I will sometimes say is, that would be taking your power away. What can you do? What other resources that are more appropriate? How can I support you in figuring that out? Reaching out to the resources, doing things. And when struggling, ask for help. The supervisor is excellent. I try not to call a supervisor in the middle of an appointment unless it's an emergency, but absolutely, you guys should be getting regular supervision to help you work out these things. And I can support you in finding other options. I can support, and one of the things I'll tell my peer, I will often give them space, because sometimes they are feeling pressure to do stuff right now. Yeah, this is harder than they sound. This is very, very true. But one of the things that I will tell my peer is, it's okay if we don't have to have a solution right now. I can support you in finding a solution. And this also brings in that not making their goal my goal. It's like, if you don't have a solution right now, that's okay. I can be with you. We don't have to do it today. If you want to do it today, well, sometimes that's not a possibility. What are some things that you can do? And it will be okay most of the time if things aren't happen that day. And one of the things is that sometimes you will have a peer that does not have the skills yet, because one of the things that we've all learned, yeah, and Bill says they staff everything, and staffing everything is excellent. Pro-con list, possibly, but I would more recommend going through PICMA, not pro-con lists, because giving our peers voice and choice, absolutely. There's a lot of different tools that we can use. How can I support you? How can I support you? And certified family support, we help them set up self-discover action steps for each of their goals. Excellent. Honestly, we need to be doing a lot of that in peer support as well, through open-ended questions and other things like this. Do a lot of these, and all of these involve boundaries. And one of the very first and basic boundaries, but the ones that get slipped through the most, is suggestions, is guiding, is I know this will work for you, so I'm gonna, we're gonna ask questions to lead you in that direction. And what's one of the ways that we steal people's power, because it's not just doing the thing, it's not just doing the steps towards the thing. There's also the confidence and, yeah, motivational interviewing, excellent. There's also building the confidence, building the problem solving skills, being okay and recognizing most of the time the world isn't going to end if something goes wrong. And that's one of the things that is very good with peer support is, and I've had so many peers say to me, but what if this doesn't work? What if I screw up? And I say, it's okay, I will still be here. And you can find something else, and I will be there and support you with that as well. Yeah, the peer breaking down the things in the steps the peer feels they can do. Excellent. Thinking outside the box. We have to be quick on our feet, but we don't have to think outside the box. Sometimes we can share some lived experience, but even there, I often say, I've been in points where I'm like, oh, there's no solution to this. And I had to step back and say, okay, I have to I might share lived experience basically about thinking outside the box. Yeah, I love Donna. It's okay. We don't have to be perfect. I will be here. And sharing lived experience, I had to look at it a different way. I had to be okay with, one of the things I tell my peers sometimes is, one thing that helps me is saying, I'm experimenting to find what works. And that means it's okay if I mess up, because that's the thing about experiments is you just collect information. That works in my family because we're a lot of nerds and we do things sciencey. And it's okay. But knowing that we will be there and it won't hurt that, because their goals are not our goals. If they don't reach their goals, it's not going to affect our relationship. That, you see how that's valuable in setting those boundaries. You guys are doing really good with this stuff. So we're going to move on to the next scenario. You can't grow without failure. I will tell you right now, comfort and growth cannot coexist. And I did not make up that saying. I don't remember who did. You can look it up. Google is your friend. But comfort and growth cannot coexist. And growth involves change. And Bill tells them it's not a failure if they learn from it. And part of my mind recoils from that, because I'm like, sometimes it still feels like a failure, but it's still okay. And yeah, you're not failing, you're learning. That's another way to put it. So we're gonna try another scenario that we can move forward on. So let's say certified peer recovery coach Tim works with a peer, Penny, who frequently flirts with Tim and sometimes gives him small gifts or treats during their appointments. Tim isn't interested in Penny and knows the gifts are cheap, so he plays along rather than making things awkward by asking her to stop. He would sometimes joke with Penny that if she advanced far enough in her recovery and didn't need services, he might take her out sometime. What code of ethics are being violated in this one? Yeah, whoa, yikes, whoa. Yeah. Well, people, you guys all recognize that this is terrible, because we know that code. It's one of those things that's like, why do we even have to have this in the code of ethics to not have? Isn't it obvious that we shouldn't have any sexual or interest in our peers? Yeah, most of them, many violations. So do you think that what reasoning do you think Tim might be going through? Because he said he's not interested, so it's not a real relationship, right? Respect their rights. Never suggest intimacy. Yeah, it might be fear. It might be personal ego. Not to hurt her. Isn't that get us in a lot of trouble? Oh, but I need to help. Oh, I need to be nice, right? Yeah, Donna says, I've had this happen and had to set strong, firm boundaries. Do no harm. do no harm is not directly on our code of ethics, but that's a really good, that is a really good thing to do. Trying to validate, not reject her, denying himself. Yeah, that would be good on our code of ethics. Never make unwarranted promises to those we serve. Excellent catch. Yeah, you'd request another peer specialist, but but you have such a crush on Tim, Bill. Talk to your supervisor, report, right. So one of the things is, does Tim know that it's very unlikely that this is going to come out unless he reports it himself? So one of the things with these things is we have had situations in the state of Idaho where bad things in this particular code of ethics have happened. Power differential doesn't want to disappoint her. And so, yeah, what Tim needs to do is say, I mean, if he's already, sometimes do we find ourselves in a situation where we were being nice and then we realized we were nice for too long and we got ourselves into a pickle? Yes, I love the yep. So this scenario is a little bit, I mean, it's not even super extreme, but yes, we sometimes do that. Ignoring this specific scenario, when we find ourselves in a pickle with a peer because we were being nice, we didn't realize there was going to be a problem, and then we find ourselves in a pickle. What are some things we could do after the fact? After we realize we've gotten ourselves in? Mandatory to self-report. We can definitely self-report. Reaffirm boundaries. Yes. Report to supervisor. Yes. Excellent. Another thing I would do, speak with the supervisor, ask that she be placed with a new peer. Yes, I would do that. I would do that while self-reporting to the supervisor. Yes, absolutely. You guys you guys are on the money here. But one of the things I would absolutely do as well is apologize to the peer. Say, I did not mean to lead you on. I did not mean to, I needed to set these boundaries better. I didn't realize it was going to be a problem. Yeah. Honestly, every scenario we've looked at is looking at possible boundary violations, but most of them don't smack people in the face with lawsuit possibilities as quickly. Refer to a female CPRC, possibly. If it depends on if Penny tends to get attached with all of her male recovery coaches. Yeah, I don't think Tim can backtrack the situation either. As we've said, reporting to the supervisor what happened, take accountability, you show everyone is still learning. Depending on how we, because yes, acknowledging your own mistake and taking responsibility are good role modeling. Absolutely. I made a mistake. And I'm owning that mistake, and I won't be working with you anymore, for instance, because of that mistake. But I'm just letting you know that I didn't mean to lead you on. I didn't mean to, or whatever we were doing, because yeah, the tone needs to be based on the population you serve. Absolutely. You guys know your peers. Yeah, admitting to a mistake is huge. It's great modeling. That is a big thing, because putting this scenario aside, when you guys think about mistakes that you've made, because all of us have made mistakes because we're human and we're on the process of recovery and we're doing skills most people don't even have through doing peer support. But we can, we're going to set this scenario aside. Think of other things that you have experienced, and you don't even have to share, but where you've made a mistake. How powerful is it? And what good boundaries and what ethical things is it doing if you can recognize and admit your mistake and apologize to the peer? We're not talking anything this big. Growing. And what is growing part of? Starts with an R. Learning. Growing is part of learning, but we're looking for the, yes, recovery. Recovery. And are we, so we're modeling recovery with that, right? What other things in the code of ethics is it modeling and doing to admit that we made a mistake? It doesn't have to be this big. Maintaining high standards of personal conduct. Yeah. What else? Is it helping to we're not better, we're equalizing those power differentials? Excellent. What else? Do you think that oh, now you say yeah, well, modeling recovery, excellent. Taking accountability. Do you think it's showing respect for that person? Yeah, we're also teaching we will all make mistakes. We need to own up and move forward appropriately. Does it show also that it's also showing self-care? Excellent. Is it also showing that it's the light that we not only that we all make mistakes, but that the world doesn't end if we own those mistakes and we can move forward? You're not an expert. We are human. We are fallible, and yeah, and helps client to learn what is a healthy relationship and what is not. Oh yeah, that is a really good, excellent thing too. You guys are doing so well at this. There are there's a lot of little things that we can do. So the scenario started a talking point because none of you guys have done this and you're like, oh, heck no, run away, run away, run away. But when it comes down to smaller mistakes, it's not necessarily stuff that would, you know, that would necessarily require ending a services for a peer. Though sometimes owning those is really valuable for recovery and really valuable for so many things of this. And you know, and we didn't even talk about the accepting small gifts, right? Because we're so overwhelmed by the you know, leading her on, basically. Yeah, there's powerful role modeling in admitting mistakes and moving on. One of the things that I had to learn in my own recovery is that it is okay. Mistakes don't make me a bad person. And how many of you guys at some point in your recovery have felt that mistakes make you a bad person? Yeah, yeah. And so a lot of our peers feel that as well. And that can you see that being a barrier to recovery? I made these mistakes already. That makes me a bad person. Bad people can't do good things. But when we can model that I can make mistakes and it's hard, but I own them and I can move forward and change, and better is better, that can really be powerful for our peers. And that is an ethical thing as well. Okay. So Next scenario, Sally it knows a woman named Barbara from church who has been struggling with symptoms of anxiety and depression. Sally shares some of her lived experience with Barbara and tells her about her role. Barbara seems encouraged by this, and a couple of weeks later, Sally is surprised when her supervisor gives Barbara to her as a new peer. Sally needed another peer, get the, we have limitations. Yeah, dual relationship right off the bat. And she feels responsible, like somehow she might have led Barbara to seek her out as a provider. So she feels obligated to help her and accepts the assignment. Yeah, no. I got different levels of no showing up in the chat. So what damage? So we know that this is big fat no with the dual relationship. Is there any other code of ethics of power differential? Conflict of interest is not in our code of ethics, but it is a conflict because we have that dual relationship. Privacy can be impacted, definitely. Anything else? I think we covered the big ones. So what damage? Yeah, respect for a person. That can happen as well. And what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? Lack of trust. Nepotism. Yeah, I can see like, oh, I usually don't do this with a peer, but I know you in other ways, so I'll let this slide, or we can do this. Yeah, I can see that. It is absolutely a dual relationship. Yeah, and this is a really good thing that Lisa brought up. Small communities, and we have a few small communities in Idaho. Sometimes not knowing somebody outside of peer work isn't always possible. If we can be extraordinarily strict with really strong boundaries, including extra boundaries that you discuss with a peer, sometimes that can be possible until another provider can be found. Absolutely, like boundaries when meeting at church and other things like this. I would also let them know that I would talk to the supervisor right out of the gate, right? Yeah, she already knows things about her, and so that could cross some boundaries too. Showing favoritism, yeah, that goes up to the nepotism thing. That's the word we were looking for. Damage the relationship at church, and not disclosing to a relationship to supervisor can create 6 secrets. I wouldn't necessarily. It can create problems. It can create problems. Basically, anytime this kind of stuff happens, you let your supervisor know, even if you're in a small town. Because we're training more people, more peers all the time, and there's always hope that there will be another peer supporter available that can that doesn't know this peer and can do that. And this includes recovery community for certified recovery coach, peer recovery coaches. Yeah, absolutely. When it is very common, especially in small towns. Hey, we're going to go to the one AA meeting in town, and oh, look, the person that I am a recovery coach for is in the same meeting, and I need support too, because I'm also in recovery. Loss of friendship, loss of church family, a peer got upset. Absolutely. Oh, I didn't like this peer support stuff, and they did something. It just makes me really upset. They kept saying no to me. Loss of work trust, loss of separation between private and work life. Oh yeah, you get that. All kinds of things with that. Dual relationships, you should hold her supervisor inside, explain the situation. Absolutely. The instant that's like, oh, I have this peer for you, be like, wait a minute, I know this, I think I know why they asked, maybe, but I know this person from church and I've talked to her about stuff. I don't think I can take this person. And if the supervisor, yeah, it could be poor self-care, that those poor internal boundaries, it can make things situation. Yeah, Ricky says, I had this situation, made it clear I would take on to help with basic stuff at the beginning, but insisted the client be moved to a new peer as soon as possible. These kind of things will sometimes happen, especially in the smaller areas. That, for instance, we're not supposed to do multiple roles like case management and peer support with a peer, but sometimes in a rural area, does that happen? Sometimes it's hard to avoid. There's all kinds of extra boundaries that go with these kind of things. Damaging peer-to-peer relationships can create trust barriers for peers with treatment team. Yeah. Yep. We do. It is important to disclose the past relationship. Small towns, it makes it challenging. But there are ways that we can deal with it ethically, even if we have to, and Amy brought up something interesting. What would be the right thing to do if a peer like invites you to a performance or a game or recital or something? Would it be good to go? I would say personally, absolutely not. Because that is absolutely a dual relationship. We basically never voluntarily do things outside of sessions with peers. If you have a boundary, I set boundaries with my peers that HIPAA requires that we never greet first in a public space if you happen to be in the same grocery store or whatever. But I tell my peers, if they wave, I will wave back, and that'll be about the extent. Maybe they can say hi, I'll say hi back. That's as far as it's going to go. Yeah, and confidentiality is a big part of that. But there's also dual relationships, because that gives the impression that you are their friend. And one of the things that one of the parts of our roles is that we are a bridge, because a lot of the times the people that we work with don't have a lot of natural supports. They have either burned bridges, or there's been some hard things in their lives that have made it so they don't have a lot of people either that they trust or who trust them, and they don't have a lot of natural supports, those friends and family that so essential to recovery. And as such, they, especially because of the more open nature of peer work of any type, they may start to feel like, you're my friend, you're my natural support, I can do that, I can lean on you. Are they going to keep, I would go beyond, not just outside of hours of services, even though that's important, but definitely like not at all outside of session times. But are they going to have the motivation to build natural supports if they feel like they got one in you? Is that going to be good for their recovery? No. And yeah, and Mary Teresa has a family support in a rural town where she was a Head Start teacher for years. She already, the connections have already made, and it can be very powerful. And the power differential definitely feeds into this, those as well as others. Oh, there's all kinds of things there where, and I can see how that would be very challenging. But one of the things about the Code of Ethics is we work to equalize. We can't make it completely equal. We're in different roles. Peer and peer specialists are two different roles. Even though it's mutual and reciprocal, there's still two different roles. We have received the training, we have ethical responsibilities, and our peer does not. But we work to minimize them as much as we can. Excellent, Cecil. And I don't know if it's Cecil or Cecil. I'm so sorry. I has been asked to be a peer support recovery coach that I had used in the past, and to absolutely say no. Excellent. In relation to boundaries and power differentials, Sally shouldn't start a peer relation through a feeling of obligation. Yes. So what kind of boundary would help prevent that feeling of obligation? What type that we mentioned before with the grid? Internal emotional boundary. Do you see how those internal and those emotional boundaries can help us with the external boundaries? If she feels obligated, does it make it harder to say no? Yes. So if she, excellent. So if she can set that internal boundary is not an ethical thing. The ethics don't say you need to have these feelings, but when we can set that internal boundary with ourselves, I don't need to feel responsible for that. I don't need to feel obligated to do this. I don't yet. And it will be hard, but those working on those internal boundaries makes the external boundaries easier. In my experience, you kind of have to do both at the same time. They feed but if you try to do the external boundaries without any internal boundaries, it will be harder because you'll feel guilty, you'll feel obligated, you'll feel I'm not doing enough. And I'm not really helping them. Oh, I can tell they're really hurting right now. And I feel responsible. We may not think it in those words, but those hard feelings, the internal is the foundation needed. Yes, Cherie. Absolutely. Internal boundaries are a great foundation to help us. We recognize I am not responsible for this. Did Sally at any point, did she say, you need to come to me to do peer support? In this scenario, as it was written out, did she say that? Nope, she didn't. So is she in any way responsible, even if Barbara misinterpreted what she said? But if she feels obligated, does that say she's feeling responsible anyway, even though she wasn't? Yep. So service, would it be a good idea to have a service contract to have a clear set boundaries? Boundaries are part of what we need to be are required to be teach as peer support certification. And hopefully your agencies encourage it. One thing I will say, once you teach this stuff for a while, you start to see some things, and you are allowed to set boundaries with your agency if your agency try it. Agencies need to support you in your code of ethics. Okay. If an agency asks you to do something that violates your code of ethics, then you're allowed to set boundaries with the agency. And that can be really hard. How many of us are like, but dude, I just got this job. You know, I really need this job. And I don't know if it's my Gen X-ness or the anxiety I've always felt, but it's really easy. Yeah, any supportive agency allows and supports peer boundaries. Absolutely. But I'm just saying that sometimes an agency, either through ignorance or just wanting to get certain things done a certain way, may not honor those as well as other agencies. And so you are allowed to set boundaries with agencies as well to help you keep your code of ethics. Okay. Is this helping at all with all the boundary talk, blah, blah, blah? Okay, I'm good. I'm glad because oh, question. Agency talks about discharge and get rid of. Okay, so Lori, I'm not sure exactly all things. Yeah, and Lisa, I got finished, Lori. Okay, so she talked about, Lori asked the question, agency talks about discharge and getting rid of. One of the things that is an appropriate boundary to set is discharge rules. On usually a very powerful with Medicaid, which is the only provider that or only insurance that covers peer support services. Now, recovery coaching is different, and there's other resources, but the insurance provider is Medicaid that covers peer services. And with Medicaid, they're not allowed to charge no-show fees. And a lot of the peers that we work with, as we've all experienced, are not necessarily in a place of their recovery where they are good about showing up. They're good about being there. They're good about letting you know if they're not going to be there. How many of you have never experienced a peer no showing or canceling at the last minute? And as such, we are paid by the billable hour, correct? Do we get paid if a peer no shows? Yeah, it happens a lot, and we do not get paid. As such, an important boundary for maintaining our own recovery. And Donna's like, never happens, actually a lot. But an important boundary for maintaining our own recovery is, and the agencies a lot of times will say that, because it's also maintaining the viability of the agency, is after a certain number of no-shows or late cancels, a peer or a client is subject to being discharged. Because we cannot keep people on schedule indefinitely if they're not going to be there, because then we don't get money, but that time cannot be used for anything else. And that's hard on everybody. And I know sometimes we feel like, but I see why they did it. I see all these other things. One of the things this is another thing that where we're sometimes feeling that obligation, that responsibility that is not ours. And those internal boundaries are very, very important. So when it comes to discharging, one of the things I will always tell my peers, no matter how challenging the situation was, is, you are welcome when you feel more ready for this to reach out again. And unless there's been like charges filed with the cops or whatever, then they have that opportunity. A lot of them, in my experience, in my limited experience, have not, but I haven't shut the door on them. And I'm not responsible if they're not in a place in their recovery where peer support is something that, or their capacity is such that making it to a peer support appointment or being at home when I show up is valuable to them, then I can't. Do you think they're going to be able to be in a place to make progress on any other goals very well? Yeah, no. There may be some possibility here or there. And it's hard, but again, this brings in those internal boundaries. I am not responsible, and we can't do this. I can't maintain my own recovery if out of the 10 peers I have in a week, 8 no-show because I don't have the heart to discharge them. Does that make sense? I've had weeks where every peer I had canceled or no-showed, every single one. And it is discouraging, on top of not good for my pocketbook. And it's hard. And we have to, sometimes boundaries, it's like, we have to look at this honestly and say, is it better for them or for me if I cling on when they don't seem to be interested in clinging on to them? I can't do more for them than they are willing to do for themselves. Absolutely. Okay. We got, yeah, and sometimes asking peers to confirm appointments, that is excellent. One of the things that, yeah, you should never work harder than the peers and have had it go both ways. And one of the things that was really good that came from me out of COVID, because with COVID for a while, our agency had us, we had to do a health check a few hours before, making sure they didn't have a fever or whatever. And so I got into the habit of calling peers a few hours before, because we had to be within a window. And that has lasted, as you know, it's great confirmation. Are you ready? And as this time, and you know, I also ask them, do you know what you want to do? Just to get them thinking about it. What goal do you want to work on today? So how do you have that conversation with your peer? Generally, a lot of agencies will have that policy. Whether or not you bring it up before there are any no-shows, it's usually a good idea. And the first thing is like, per agency policy, if there, you know, if you have stuff that comes up and you know you can't make it, you get sick or whatever, you can, you know, call and cancel. And, you know, but the cancellation policy is pretty much going to be per agency. If your agency doesn't have that policy in place, you need to talk to your agency about that, because most agencies have that policy because they're losing money otherwise. Yeah, and 3 and done with no calls or no shows, that's very, very common. The cancellation policy, if your agency doesn't have that policy, then I would talk to your supervisor and have them, because you can set an individual thing, but if your agency has no cancellation or no show policy, then they're losing money. And yeah, and sometimes you call and there's still a no show, and that will happen. And I know from peers I've worked with and also my own personal experience that sometimes you forget, but sometimes you just aren't very invested in it, in which case you're going to struggle moving forward in your recovery anyway. Right. In the YES system of care with children's mental health, one of the principles of care is unconditional regard for the family, or we don't give up on them. We always leave the door open and use motivational interviewing as much as possible. Excellent. Those are excellent, excellent tools. That does not say, you know, you're just out of here. But like I said, when we review the policy with them so that they have choices, they know in advance, and that gives them the choice. Motivational interviewing is very good, and letting them, they need to know that a choice needs to be made. Yeah, so yeah, excellent, Lori. I'm glad, you know, that was very helpful. That sometimes, and one of the things that we have to also acknowledge is sometimes peer support doesn't come in till later, and sometimes there's a repeated pattern. But we cannot help people who are unwilling. This is part of what the boundaries are. If they are unwilling to even meet with us, even be there, then we definitely can't help them. And it's not on us. But when we say we don't give up on people, it doesn't mean we're giving up on them. They may not be ready for certain services. And this goes to the family support and the YES stuff as well. It's like, we do motivational interviewing, you know, how can I support you to, you know, would a schedule change be helpful here? Because sometimes peers need a schedule change, but they're scared to ask for a schedule change. Would, you know, how can I support doing this? Or, you know, maybe do you feel like this is something that you want to do? Because sometimes they change their mind. Now that I understand that peer support isn't going to swoop in and solve all my problems, I don't want to do it anymore. They have that choice. A referral for other services might be a better fit at this time. Yeah, that could be possible as well. It could be that right now they are so overwhelmed by the disabling powers of their illness that peer support, which is like more of the hope and beyond stage, is just too much. It's not something that they're ready for. Honest communication is absolutely essential. But it may be a point at which, like, I'm just trying to find housing and food each week, and I'm just really struggling and with my symptoms, at which point counseling, med management, case management, maybe some CBRS, and then we can, but always leaving that door where they can get, when they feel ready, they can start peer again. Yeah, and location change can be helpful as well. How can I support you in doing this? What can make this easier or help you feel safer with this? There's a lot of reasons that peers don't show, and some they have more control over than others. And but we don't have to do that, you know. And one of the things I'll tell my peers, I understand if because one of the things that is can be challenging is that there are a lot of times very they have a very good reason, they just don't choose to share it. They just choose to when you call to remind them, oh, by the way, I can't meet today, or just not be there. And because one of the things about mutual and reciprocal and equalizing the power differential is we want them to have some respect for us as well, at least enough to let us know. What barriers are the peer dealing with to disengage with services? That's very good questions to ask. I wouldn't always use those words. It depends on my history with the peer, but absolutely. Because the peer may have, yes, I've also brainstormed with peers to help them find ways to keep appointments straight because they get confused when they have multiple appointments to providers. Excellent. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. I discuss it, you know, with the peers, using PICBA to help them identify, identify the problem, like the barriers getting in the way, identify their impact on the problem, which helps identify what power they have in addressing the problem, identifying the cost and benefit. You know, if I do address the problem, then I can meet with you more consistently, but I'll have to put more work into it. But if I don't address the problem, then I will lose services, but I don't have to change anything, you know, the cost and benefit kind of thing. And then we get to brainstorming. What can you do about that? What's worked for you in the past? Maybe it's sharing a little lived experience if they have no idea. You know, I find that reminders on my phone are essential, kind of thing. Stuff like this to help them, you know. You write it down, but then I don't look at, well, I have found sometimes keeping it visible is essential for me and my ADHD. Oh, I hadn't thought about that, kind of thing. We can share lived experience, you know, if they really can't think of anything of ours for themselves. But yeah, there's a lot of different barriers, but sometimes a peer is just not ready for peer services, or they are not at a stage. Are they overwhelmed with too many services? Possibly. I mean, there's just a lot of possibilities. You have to discuss it with the peer, and it's going to be a little bit different with each peer. So all these things have to do, you know, they're ethical and they're also boundaries. Peer support is always voluntary. There is in the state of Idaho sometimes court mandated peer support, but the majority of peer support is 100% voluntary. And even when it's court ordered, there's a lot of voluntary aspects to it. And it's not the right fit for, yeah, sometimes they just want another peer. It's like, you have a funny nose and it bothers me. I don't know. I always text my clients for the first month the night before to confirm scheduled times. Do not allow our times to be moved so there's continuity. Yeah, and I have found that continuity can be helpful to some degree, but being too, I also have some flexibility from them. So yeah, but it depends on what population you're serving, and other aspects of stuff. So and one more scenario. So Jenny, a family sports socialist, is supporting a family from Mexico. She finds some of their customs uncomfortable and questions if some of the religious and cultural traditions may be contributing to some of the barriers the child with the diagnosis of severe emotional disturbance is experiencing. Discussing some of her theories with some of her friends on social media. She changes the names for privacy, but includes details of diagnoses and conditions. What code of ethics are being violated here? Respect the rights and dignities of those they serve. Yes, yes, yes. So many. There's a lot. Lack of respect, especially of culture. Is there possibly some discrimination going on? Yep, lots of discrimination. Lots, and privacy, confidentiality. Yes, 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 yes. You guys understand this stuff. So yeah, HIPAA is quite possibly HIPAA or just simply confidentiality there that can be a privacy, confidentiality, rights, dignity, culture, competency, training in their future. Yeah, you guys are C, B, and G, or CL. My eyes are old. B and G. Yeah, we got a lot of violations going on here. What damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? Trust, absolutely. Termination. Well, usually termination is, possible lawsuit. If this information this person shares is identifiable enough, it could be a lawsuit, and a HIPAA violation. Relationship with peer in the family, yeah, because this is family support. Professional relationships, feelings of discrimination and acceptance. Respect, trust, integrity, yep. If she is struggling, this is something should be talked with her supervisor, not on social media. Absolutely. She could damage the child's relationship with his parents and family. Yep. Lost trust, damage to child, damage to peers' religious beliefs, damage to work trust, damage to social media. I would say damage to the people she's chatting with. Do you think that this increases stigma or decreases stigma? Yep. And is it our role to, are we working to decrease stigma? We're decreasing it, right? All right, that's part of our role. We, not colleagues and those we serve, we share a recovery journey. We work to decrease stigma. And that doesn't just include with mental health, even though she's bringing it in. Secondary trauma to those listening and reading her post, possibly. It depends on how she presents them, but possibly. Spreading the stigmas, yeah. Stigmas with the diagnoses, but also possibly the stigmas with culture, right? If in drug and alcohol situation would be Oh, I don't even know the CFR, but I believe you, Betty. I believe you. Yeah, there's all kinds of violations going on here. Even changing the names, because one of the things is if it's identifiable, we don't go anywhere near that. No, it's not just the names. And sometimes it's like if you do names, diagnosis, everything, here's like the whole kit and caboodle. That is absolutely no. Take out the names and you're a little bit safer. But if it's identifiable at all, we're still having problems. So usually we want to take out even more than that, and we don't want to share it publicly in a way that is going to increase stigma at all. Oh my gosh, in a rural setting, yeah. Yeah, educate yourself with their beliefs. That is a very culturally sensitive way to approach it. Might help you be more understanding. Yeah, and I'd also ask the family and stay away from the social media. One of the things I will tell you guys right now, you need to lock, if you're on social media at all, you can mention the work that you do. You never mention stuff about cases, but the big thing, you lock down your account like nobody's business. And I don't just mean a good password. You need to lock down all your social media, delete accounts you don't use, lock down your social media so that other people don't have access to your profile information or anything else, and not your friends list, not your photos, nothing, because that can be that can lead to not just is it possible for a peer to look you up on social media and find you? If it is, you got a problem. If they can find you and see anything about you, any photos, any of your friends, any of that stuff, you've got a problem. So when it comes to social media, it's not that you have to avoid it. You just have to do it wisely and very carefully. And impact bias, yeah, stalking is possible. I have not personally experienced it, thank goodness, but it is. Sometimes we've talked about peers that don't have a lot of natural supports really wanting to have us become their natural supports. And as such, connecting on social media may seem natural. And yeah, and there are services out there that you can remove your personal information from people find sites. I personally have a blog, and it is my firstname.com, which most people can't do, but my name is weird enough that I can totally do that. And I had to be very careful about that, because blogs by nature, you can't lock down as much, but I turn off a lot of comments. But you stay private. Think about keeping comments away from the keyboard. If you're private, internet is a very hacked space. But one bonus to this, locking it down, is that one of the things that happens sometimes on things like Facebook is your profile's getting copied, and then the hacker, they're not hackers, I call them spoofers. They then try to friend all of your friend lists so that they can get access to things, and which everybody's annoyed by. Nobody likes it. And but with the lockdowns you do to keep your social media safe from to keep your social media safe when it comes to HIPAA and other things like this, it can also protect you from a lot of hackers and spoofers. So the bonus, right? Yeah, well, others can see comments on friends' pages, yeah, even if they're blocked. So yeah, there's all kinds of things that you have to be careful about. Be careful about what we do, and careful about what we say. We don't want to increase the stigma or any kind of, including for cultural things. So moving on a little bit, we've got some other tips. A lot of these we've already talked about some. Avoid letting your peer's goal become your goal. Our goal is to support our peer. We support the peer in working towards their goal and building up their skills and building up their natural supports and building up their resources. Taking their goal on ourselves can make it harder to keep boundaries that allow the peer to gain skills and resources to move into recovery. Their goal is not our goal. It just isn't. And it's so easy to slip into. I want to support you doing this. And I get excited. And oh, that can sometimes lead me to do things I shouldn't do. And if they need to change their goal, it's okay. But most of the time, it affects things on a session by session basis. In my experience, I don't like cling to their goal, but I might be a little maybe overly enthusiastic about it, or it might make it harder for me to set physical boundaries because I'm like, oh, but you wanted to do this, so oh, I can help you in this way to get it done today. But yeah, and yeah, definitely let them change their goal. So are you seeing the peers' barriers and limitations or their strengths? If you are looking for ways to help and fix things, then you're not strength focused. This is something that honestly, it was a real eye-opener for me to realize that when I'm looking for ways to help, I'm looking for something that's wrong. And we come into this whole thing usually because we want to help. And so we're looking for problems to fix. And we got to, and that's an internal boundary we need to set. So to help keep us in our lane. Okay. We want to focus on what the peer can do, even if it currently seems small. Helps these limitations, supports these strengths of peers. Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, Lisa. Thank you. And we want to find hope on what they can do. When I know in early stages of my recovery, I didn't see anything I could do. And it took a lot of work to say, well, maybe I suck slightly less at this. So maybe I could work on that a little bit, I guess. That super thin thing, I had to build on that. We want to find hope in the things, even if it's the things they just don't suck at. Find hope in that. We find hope and baby steps. Yes, Adele, all those things are good. And we want to find hope in that and support that. Being there, being patient, not letting their goals become our goals because that can make us less patient or more fixy. We find hope and support that and are there. That is massive to helping the peer feel safe in trying the baby steps, safe in trying something risky or new, safer that they're not going to be rejected if they fail. Okay. Your hope and focus can help your peer feel more capable and safe moving in positive directions. Yeah. Pointing out strengths, even better. What did you do? If they can identify their strengths, that's even better. Because I might help them identify by asking questions like, how does this compare to how it was last month? And they're like, well, I guess it was better. Did seem better, didn't it? How did that feel? You did that. And things like that that really help build that confidence that they need. And I'm sorry, some of you guys seem to be having internet connections. I will try to let you in when I can. Good boundaries focus on what is, not on what should be. Okay. If we allow our perception to be tainted by what we think someone's body or a peer or a family or the system or ourselves should be doing, we will either become frustrating or try to fill in missing gaps by letting boundaries slip. I know that I personally have hurt myself because my body should be able to do this. So I'm going to push myself and push myself and push myself to do it. And then I get hurt because my body can't do that at that point. And we are all different. There's many paths to recovery. Our own ideas and goals could far surpass our own. Recovery is person oriented. They get to do it. Breaking things down with small steps and celebrating small victories. Excellent. Derek, Lori, you guys are giving great information here. We want to support that in our peers. And one of the ways we do that is supporting that in ourselves. I mean, that's partially modeling good recovery, right? Which is an ethical thing that we need to do. So we got to let go of the shoulds. I mean, we say that a lot, but a lot of things we don't realize are shoulds. The system should do this. The person should do this. And Donna, I already mentioned, we got a lot of people getting kicked out. There's just a lot of little things like this that if we remember, kind of recognize shoulds and detach them, what is, and what is, like a person is no showing 3 or 4 times without any explanation. That is not what should be, not what, what could be if they could just show up. We have to deal with what is. Yeah, we want to stop shooting ourselves, stop shooting the system, stop shooting our peers. What is I cannot maintain my own recovery having this spot in my schedule that is dedicated to somebody who's not showing up. Things like that. And other boundaries that are very, very, very valuable. You guys have been great today. I do have some contact information here. Meet the peer where they're at, and it's okay where they're at. They want more, we support them in finding them more. But first step is being okay where you're at. At least finding value and not feeling shame for where you're at. I am a co-facilitator of peer support certification training at CMI. If you need more information on that, you can go to our website at peersupportidaho.com. You can email me directly at peersupport@dyany.com. Any questions or comments before we close up? You are welcome, Terry. Boundaries, one of the things I will tell you with boundaries, they're not a switch. It's not like, oh, I have boundaries now because I now learn about them. One of the things I found with boundaries, I set boundaries. Oh, that was good. But I'm now recognizing even more boundaries. It's like so many kinds of growth. You grow and then you notice more ways you can grow, which in some ways is annoying. But in some ways is kind of cool. You guys can get better at this. And it really helps with ethics. Yep, we do have a PDF. There's a recording. You will be getting an email with certification, or not certification question, but the CEU questions. Empower Idaho will be sending stuff out.
Yes, thank you, Dyany, for one, a wonderful presentation, and 2, for sharing that reminder about CEUs. Again, that information was also emailed to you in the confirmation email. And on Tuesday and Wednesday, we sent a couple with important information on CEUs as well. So go ahead and go through your inbox if you're unsure about that. Thank you for joining us. We do have, I know several of you are aware of the final session that we had, the scenario session that was capped to 30 people. We did have somebody that had to cancel. So if you are interested in joining us, please feel free to register. Thank you. Thank you for joining. I know it was 2 hours, and I hope that you can have a good break before joining us for the next session. So thank you again.